Well, we got David Senra from Founders Podcast coming into the studio. Welcome to the show. How you doing, David?
What's up, guys? Before we begin, I have to apologize for not wearing a suit, but I think you'll make an exception because I'm wearing a ramp shirt.
Oh, there we go. Let's hear it. Switch your business to ramp.com. Save time and money. How you doing? What's the latest?
There used to be this thing. I mean, it's probably still a thing where David you'd be happy to meet somebody, but the one requirement was that they listen to Founders. Yeah. Eventually, it's going to be you listen to Founder and your business runs on Ramp.
I won't take
and if you don't check both boxes, just not happening.
No shot.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, what's the latest? Did you read the Bloomberg article about Johnny Ive joining OpenAI? Okay.
No, you have to tell me what's going on.
So
I just got a bunch of text messages about this, and I think there's something related to Steve Jobs coming back to Apple we could talk about too. That's interesting. But no, I have no idea what's happening.
So the article is obviously it's amazing in the sense that it's Johnny Ive, a $6 billion acquisition, huge number, 2% of OpenAI equity going over to Johnny Ive and his team. But and it's also super interesting because they're going to build a hardware device for ChatGPT, for AI, an AI first hardware. And if there's any team that can break through with a consumer electronics product, it's got to be Sam Altman and Johnny Ive, right? Like they are an incredible combination to go after this. At the same time, the article basically said nothing. And they put out a 9-minute video and it's just them saying, oh, he's one of the most thoughtful individuals. He's one of the best people to work with. His family's amazing. And they're just talking about how much they love working together. And it doesn't actually give us any advice on or any guidance on is it a phone? Is it a watch? Is it going to fold? Is it big? Is it small?
That's very Steve Jobs-esque. He'd be very proud. Listen,
that's good.
I guess going into this, I'm an unabashed Johnny Ive fan.
Okay.
There's actually an excellent biography of him that I think everybody should read.
Please.
I read it 5 years ago. If you want to listen to the podcast I did on it, it's episode 178 before you get the book.
Yeah.
But I'd highly recommend reading the entire book. I think if you think about the conversation we had this morning about taking things very seriously, I FaceTimed you guys at 6:30 in the morning and you're in your studio getting ready and preparing.
We were sitting in these exact seats.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that jumps out in Johnny's biography. It's just his intolerance for a lack of effort. So there's a great story. I just pulled up a bunch of my highlights from the book. But when Johnny was in design, he was studying industrial design. I think it was in England. And there's this great line where a friend of his comes over. They have a project, right? And they're making these foam prototypes of product they're designing. And he goes in Johnny's apartment and he found over 100 foam model prototypes where most students would build half a dozen. So the normal expectation is, hey, I'm going to make 6 prototypes of this, new design for this product I'm doing. And Johnny's like, yeah, fuck that. I'm doing 100. And I think when you read the book, it makes sense. I just tweeted this out where it's actually Steve Jobs. Let me pull it up. Steve Jobs talking about Johnny. And he's talking about Johnny with Walter Isaacson, and he's writing the book with Walter Isaacson as he knows he's dying. And he calls, he says that essentially if he had a spiritual partner at Apple, it would be Johnny. He's not just a designer. That's why he works directly for me. He has more operational power than anyone else at Apple except me, and there's no one who can tell him what to do besides Steve. So again, I always think of actions express priorities, one of my favorite maxims. And Steve is telling you, he had probably the highest bar of talent out of anybody's ever existed.
Yeah.
And he's saying, this is the best guy. This is my number 2. I think that speaks volumes about what he thought of in terms of Johnny's talent.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because I guess the open question in my mind is, does Johnny Ive need a Tim Cook figure to do what he does? And what I mean by that is that obviously Tim Cook's been the CEO of Apple for over a decade now, but he was a supply chain mastermind, and Johnny Ive could throw a crazy idea out there like an aluminum milled unibody design for the MacBook Pro, and Tim Cook was able to actually go get it done. And in the new era of global competition with China, faltering relationships, and not a legacy at OpenAI around hardware manufacturing, which is a unique skill set. Can Johnny Ive actually deliver a product that gets into the hands of millions of consumers with the quality that Apple is known for without a Tim Cook-like figure? Will we see another acquisition?
I mean, Steve Jobs needed a Tim Cook figure. I think anybody does. So like, yeah, the answer is of course he does. Like we have obviously no idea what they're going to build. What I think is just interesting is, which way more applicable to like us and the people that are listening, is just like to study. I just tweeted this back at Sam Parr from My First Million. It's like, you don't copy the what, you copy the how. And so I think the important thing of like, yeah, you could hypothesize of like what Johnny's going to build, or you could just like, hey, how does this guy approach like his life and work? Is there anything that he said in there that I could actually use? And I think that's like much more interesting to me than be like, can you predict what's going to happen with this thing that they're told no details about? And that like, who knows? I don't know. Like, can they build hardware? Who the fuck knows? Like, we're going to find out. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not into like prediction. I'm just like, we'll see.
Yeah. So, I mean, he wasn't a founder at Apple. He became a founder by founding IO and his Love From, his agency. Now he's back in the senior executive role. Can you tell me a little bit about his management style, how hardcore he is, anything that ties to Johnny Ive's like living like founder mode, or any of those kind of ties to other executives, kind of what we might expect or what we might pattern match against? Is it just Steve Jobs, or are there other people?
I think he had like I would argue like, equal to sense of like a high threshold for quality that Jobs did. I was just listening to the episode I did 5 years ago on Johnny's biography, and it's like talks about, it's like they thought very similar about design and products, and they were very much partners. Almost like a co-founder relationship is I know that'd be controversial, but like that's the way I would think about it, like how deeply they were working together. But what I would say is he's like much more diplomatic, where Johnny's like, we could do better than this, and Steve Jobs was like, this is shit, get it out of my face. and part of that, I think they hypothesize, his biographer hypothesizes that it's like, his growing up in England, like his just more reserved and quiet manner. But what I loved is, I think the very beginning of the book, the author is interviewing him. And he was, and this is even before he was going to write a book on him. He was just covering Apple at the time. I think he was a reporter, if I remember correctly. And he just like wanted a soundbite on this new Apple product. And he says, I just wanted a soundbite. But he launched into a passionate 20-minute soliloquy about his latest work. I could barely get in a word edgewise. He couldn't help himself. Design is his passion. And I think he's just obviously completely obsessed and willing to like work hard. There's another thing that I thought was interesting. He calls it attention to invisible details. It says, Johnny cared deeply about the parts users would never see, believing that, quote, care was taken even on details, hard and soft, that people may never discover. And he says that he was fanatical. He provided a fanatical care beyond the obvious stuff. So these just like, that's why I'm just a huge fan of anybody like this. I don't care if you're building the iPhone or you're making a pizza. Like, just I'm very attracted to and obsessed with people that take whatever they're doing very, very seriously.
It's funny that the opposite is Enzo, who's like, I don't care if the door panels align. I care if the driver
shits his pants.
Yeah.
I would actually argue that they're very similar, because Enzo, remember, like Enzo was building a race car. He wasn't trying to, it just happened that when they were winning all the races, then you have all these consumers say, hey, I want a Ferrari though too. But I would actually think like what they both share in common is they keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
And in Enzo's cases, he's not trying to build a luxury product. He's trying to literally make the fastest car. That he didn't give a shit about Ferrari, the actual auto manufacturer, if you read his biography. And in fact, the longest book I've ever read for founders, let me see if I can find it real quick, was a 1,000-page biography of Enzo Ferrari.
Of Enzo, no way.
And it was just republished, same author. This book is excellent. It's Enzo Ferrari by Luca De Monte. So this used to be 1,000 pages. No one bought the goddamn book because no one wants to read 1,000 pages. So they edited it down to 450 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, so if Enzo's one of my favorite founders I've done like 3 or 4 episodes on him.
Johnny Ive at Love From his design consulting agency, one of their biggest clients is Ferrari today.
I didn't know that.
And so there's probably some linkages here.
That's perfect.
So can you give us a little bit more about what we can expect? We were joking about maybe OpenAI should just
the device
integrate with the Ferrari. And you just need to buy a Ferrari if you want to access the premium tier of ChatGPT. You can only access
you
it when
only
you're
experience it on the saddle leather of a Ferrari.
that will only work if they're going to do a collaboration with TBPN.
Yeah,
I think that's
oh, sorry, I can't do my homework today. My Ferrari's in the shop.
This summer, I'm gonna force you to go to the Ferrari dealer in LA and get one, because if you're really such an Enzo fan,
exactly, you should have a Ferrari.
Shouldn't you be honoring his legacy every time you go to the grocery store?
It's funny. I drove past my daughter used to go the school my daughter used to go to was actually next door to a Ferrari dealership in Miami, which is like the most Miami thing ever, right?
That's super Miami. Yeah.
But there's I tweeted it out when I passed by the other day, because it says he had this great line where he's like, passion can't be explained, it can only be lived. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's like a really good way to think about the way he lives his life. But when we finish that thought, it's just like his primary thing was just like, I want the fastest race car in the world. And so that's what he meant. He's like, I don't give a shit if the doors don't line up. I just, when the race car driver hits the gas, I want him to shit his pants, which is also a fucking hilarious quote.
Yeah, I wonder what the AI equivalent of that is. Like, what is the Ferrari of AI models right now? Because they're all kind of completing.
I'm personally very excited about this. I was just talking to our mutual friend Patrick from Invest Like the Best, and we both feel very similarly. It's just like, I don't want to look at screens all day long. So I know you had you had that guy that's building Friend. His name escapes me at the moment. Avi. Yeah, just this idea, like, I'm not saying I want to wear something around my neck or have glasses on my face or whatever, but anything that would kind of get me out off of looking at screens is like, I'm very, like, I would buy it day one just to test it out.
Yeah, John was saying like maybe a Walkman style device with wired headphones, kind of analog, but just piping the AI right into your brain.
Maybe a football helmet.
Saying,
you could pack.
It's interesting. I was thinking it's like, what is Elon's AI hardware plays? One is Optimus, right? But then the other is actually just Neuralink. He's like, I want to jump, he could say, I want to jump to like the end state, which is like human and computer become one.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I want the opposite of that. I did this episode on Christopher Nolan, and it was very fascinating because this guy makes some of the most high-tech movies of all time. They're very difficult to make, and yet he lives a complete like analog life. One of the famous anecdotes from his biography was hilarious, where he doesn't have an email, doesn't even he carries like a normal flip phone, won't use GPS, like goes to a new city and has to like feel his way around and ask for directions and everything. But the funny part was people, send scripts everywhere. So they're like, oh yeah, just like, I'll read your script, email it to me. He's like, I'm going to fly on a plane tomorrow and I'll be at your house at noon. And he'll hand you the script if he wants you to be in the movie. And then he sits there and stares at you while you read it. And then you're done, you talk about it. And then he takes the script back and leaves. There's no other copy.
That's amazing.
So yeah, man, everybody's got to figure out their own integration for what they want for technology. I want to disappear in the background. In many cases, like if you study this book, and again, I would order the book, I would definitely read it. It's worth it. Especially because he's going to play a fucking huge role at one of the most important companies in the world right now.
Totally.
But I just like, I want technology to disappear. I do. There is some quotes in the book that might be fascinating that kind of answers your question, John. I didn't mean to like side skirt it at all.
It's fine.
But as far as like how he thinks about design, he says he takes big chances instead of evolutionary approach to design. And if they focus grouped any of his designs, this is a description of him in college. It was also accurate when he went to Apple. And if they had focused his designs, they wouldn't have been a success. So he's not looking for like, he really wasn't interested in like any kind of like iterative design. He wants something that looks completely different. And there is a weird story. I think some people might find it odd. Story from his college days when he was studying design, that he talked about that the best physical objects, they are very inviting to the touch, that humans have this, I forgot what he called it, like an obsession. He has a word for it, but essentially obsession with touching things. And so he was asked to like design a pen, and people are like, okay, I'm going to write create a pen that you can write and it works upside down or it never runs out of ink. He's like, no, but what do people actually do with pens? Like anybody holding a pen in their hand, they're like clicking it, they move it around. He's like, they want to, I didn't think he said this word, but they want to finger it, for lack of a better word. So they want to like play with it a lot.
Yeah.
And so any kind of physical device that he makes, I think, isn't going to just be like, oh, this kind of looks like an iPhone. I think it's going to be like drastically different.
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
And I mean, he's pulled away from Apple a lot of the people that were integral to the magic of the devices, the MacBook, the iPhone, all these things.
I'm really excited to see it. 2026 can't come soon enough. What about Jim Simons? You did a recent show about him. Very different from Johnny Ive, but what are the similarities? Because you think about a hedge fund versus a consumer electronics manufacturer. I imagine that there are no similarities, and yet I imagine you found some.
How much would you pay to rip a heater with Jim Simons and Johnny Ive at once? I mean, that's a priceless heater right there. That's potentially a 7-figure heater.
This is why I think I got so many text messages and they linked me to whatever article today. Because OpenAI essentially bought Johnny's company. Johnny was the founder, and it's for like $6 billion or something. I guess is the thing. And everybody said the same thing in the text messages, like, how much money did Apple pay to like buy back Steve Jobs?
Yeah.
And this is one of the thing that Jim has in common, Rockefeller has in common, Bezos. I just did Bezos' shareholder letters, which I think is a really good episode. Michael Dell, over and over again. It's just like this idea of like you absolutely must work with the highest quality people you can, and everybody fucking says that, and nobody does it because it is so hard to do it. And one of the reasons I also Brad Jacobs talks about this, like you have to overpay for talent because it's nearly impossible to overpay for talent. So that obviously the canonical example of that is, hey, Apple's going to buy Next for $500 million. They paid essentially $500 million to rehire Steve Jobs, and they got the deal of a century. Nobody's going to look back at what Steve did and be like, oh, you overpaid it. It just doesn't happen. So Jim, the crazy thing about Jim, and then actually me and a mutual friend of ours that I can't name just stayed up till like 2 a.m. talking to this guy that works at Citadel. And it was very fascinating. Like Ken Griffin was the same exact way. We just like, I heard some of the competition for his top people, and guess what? Like they would blow. I think it would shock how much money they make, but then you look at their performance. It's like direct. Essentially, Ken won't cap their compensation. So like if you make him more money, you're like unlimited money that you'll get because of he understands the talent. So the thing about Jim is that's nuts, right? Is he churns through partners. And, you know, people say Jim Simons had a hedge fund. I don't think about it as a hedge fund. I think he had a magic money machine. Like it was very different than normal. You know, the fund made well over $100 billion in profit, and it continues to make, from what I understand, you know, many, many billions in cash flow every single year. And there's no outside money. It's just owned. The only money's in there was Jim's family's money. And then you have to work at Renaissance.
Yeah.
And then if you quit, the reason they have such low turnover is because if you quit, you can't invest in the medallion fund anymore.
Yeah,
so you're never going to quit.
Go invest your money somewhere else.
But the crazy thing is, so what I'll do is like the fascinating thing is Jim is like churning through partners because it takes him decades of trial and error to actually get the system that he wants. But then he would talk about, and he talks about this when he's an older man too. He'd give interviews much older because he wasn't doing that when he was younger. But he's just like, you have to work with the very best people. And when you identify the person, you have to just put all the effort you possibly can to convince them to work for you. Okay. A lot of people understand that. But then you go look up the people he identified, and it's just like, he hired nothing but mathematicians and physicists. And you'd be like, yeah, it's not just like some professor in a math department somewhere. It's like this guy has a theorem named after him, and there's a law named after him. It's like literally the top of the top of the top of the top, because they were, you know, made $100 billion plus with 300, anywhere from what I've heard, 250 to like 400 employees. So a very, very tiny team, small team relative to the profits produced of just unbelievable A players. And I have to imagine that's what, you know, people at OpenAI are doing. It's like, well, who's the best designer in the world? If we're going to build our own product, who would you go and get? And
it's worth 2 points.
Yeah.
2%. It's totally worth it. That's what I was saying. It's a big number, but it's a big company. It's a big opportunity.
And of course, Josh Kushner was already in IO.
Oh yeah,
so now he's getting more
Using
OpenAI.
everything.
Thrive gets more of OpenAI. Yeah,
Yep.
but anyways, speaking of mathematicians, we got Scott Wu.
Yeah, we got Scott Wu from
Temple.
Cognition coming in.
I'm jealous. I love Scott. Big fan of his. Have you guys ever played the video of him at a math competition when he's like 12 on the show?
I mean, it's been viral so many times. We haven't played it on our show, but we probably should.
It still plays in my mind.
But
it's excellent.
We'll bring him in to the studio. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Yep, of course. See you guys soon.
Love
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Talk to you soon.
Love you too. Bye.
Love you too. Bye.